There's been a promising relationship in terms of building a strong opportunity for individuals to understand exactly what's important about building strong communities. The way in which we have been able to do it has been through advocacy groups that have been involved with finding fairness and treatment to people everywhere. The NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, has been on the front line for that particular purpose. We're here now with the president of the chapter that's here in Irvington, with their president, Ms. Kathleen Witcher. Ms. Witcher, thank you very much for giving us an opportunity to be able to share with our viewers the value and importance of this organization. How are you doing?
Doing fine. A lot of struggle this week, a lot of action in Trenton.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm pleased to be retired so I can be right there when the meetings and the hearings are held. On Monday, we were able to sit in on the hearing that was conducted by the Senate Budget and Appropriations Committee with our State Education Commissioner, Chris Cerf. He
has been confirmed?
Yes, he has been confirmed. It's a long time getting there. He was acting in the position held up by Senator Ronald Rice. And I think that was a very good thing. I think it was remarkable on Senator Rice's part because as we see Cerf in action, it does not seem that we have a one-tiered system that works for everyone around the state. It seems that there's a two-tiered system and that it seems apparent that like in Chicago, Detroit, Philadelphia, New York City, Newark, that we have a two-tiered system and privatization of public education is on the table.
What does he do to make it evident?
Doesn't show up. He doesn't seem to be inclusive. We wait to hear from him when we write communications. It seems that he talks about choice rather than the tenets and beliefs and practices of public education. The credit that he wanted to give himself on Monday at the hearing was that New Jersey had spent the most money on schools in the history of the state. He was corrected by Senator Sarlo, who chaired that committee, right away, and he was asked to explain what's going to happen with innovation aid, which the governor can appropriate however he sees, but $2 million of the $5 million, which we agree needs to go to pre-K, since it's been documented that children need early childhood education, and we see the great progress made by those children afforded preschool. Cerf is talking about $2 million for a piloted program of school choice, or in other words, 200 students around, he calls the low-performing districts, but he did not name them, would be afforded to go with vouchers to a private school. In the meantime, we know that private education was never supposed to be funded by public fund under the state constitution. But the governor, if he wished to, could allot the money there. We also know that there's a bill that is up in the Senate. I hope it's not voted on this time because I think it's not fair to say that private schools could also receive public funding because some of them are religious schools, which airs the question, is there separation of church and state? This bill would try to say that as long as a religious school didn't teach religion, then they could receive public funding. Very dangerous. And I know that on Monday there are charter school bills coming up under Senator Danen. We did hear something from Senator Danen yesterday when we attended the PTA legislative day. And we did get a chance to go and speak to the State Board of Education on Wednesday, a busload from Newark NAACP. And the Newark NAACP is concerned with the moratorium that was passed by the entire school board by the entire city council and also by the entire freeholder board in Essex County, saying that there's a $57 million budget deficit and that the superintendent of schools in Newark, under takeover, Superintendent Anderson, is cutting so that we can't figure out what's going on, but hundreds of teaching and other positions are standing for layoff. There's no more extended day programs for the children, and that was to supplement their regular education program. And also that in the meantime, Superintendent Anderson is hiring consultants. One firm was hired to do a study on the decline of enrollment in Newark Public Schools, and we asked for a copy of that report, which was presented last year before the school closed for the year, and we are still waiting on that report.
You know, you said a lot in that very short period. One of the things, obviously, you know, I've always been a strong advocate for choice. What I have not been an advocate for has been a competition in education between the two systems, and certainly loopholes in order to make one benefit from the other. And I think that that's where we have now found a real dissatisfaction in the policies that are being represented in this new administration. The criteria behind the aspects of what you're sharing with us now in relationship to what Commissioner Cerf has begun to do really alienates the way in which we were dynamically trying to find solutions for the problems that they're pointing out, that they need to structure a method that would help all of the children and not just a subset of the children.
Yes.
Now, this idea of vouchering is gone way beyond choice. And you're right. It's circumventing the Constitution and trying to find a way in which it can create a loophole that will take away from a standard system that really needs to have some more attention given to remedy the problems that exist. Where do you think the reality is going to finally find its existence?
I would hope that the public hearing is returned. I remember as I was a young teacher, before I ever got to be a leader of any organization, including the NAACP, that we were in the New Jersey Association of Black Educators. We used to look forward to presenting information at the public hearing, what would work best for all of the children. Prior to that time, I can remember my parents talking about T&E, quality education, T&E, which came out to be a constitutional right of thorough and efficient education for all children in the state of New Jersey. I was able to discuss this week and try to update what we see as a coming problem, because when Governor Christie was elected to office as governor in New Jersey, he made some statements that special education requires too much paperwork. We should throw it out, and then we should streamline what we're doing for special needs students. I am a bit disturbed by that because there are federal regulations that have been drafted by educators and professionals, and that whenever any plans are being made, we need to discuss them, consult with them, make decisions that bind what we agree on. And we expressed this earlier in the year to Senator Ruiz, who is our chair of the Senate Education Committee. Now, on that road, I see deregulation of charter school. I was surprised to learn that the charter schools are not held to the same standard.
Right. But that was particular because it really wasn't a program that was supposed to become a standard in the first place.
Exactly. I think I've been on a journey to justice in Washington, D.C. Mm-hmm. there were a few thousand students who came in from as far across the country as Oakland, California, from as close as Philadelphia and New York City, who said they're closing down our schools, but the schools don't remain closed. They close them for a couple of months, put a new name up on the school, and open it up as a charter school, but only the neighborhood children can't attend. They must go to a lottery. Again, my concern as a former educator and steeped in education advocacy from my parents down, is that every child receive thorough and efficient education. It was not drafted as something that was temporary. It was drafted so that in the beginning, the wealthier children who were receiving a lot of things versus the urban children who were receiving less would somehow find middle ground. Now you have the charter school that vows that, oh, we get excellent education, but they haven't shown it. And my example is personal. I had a great niece who was able to go on to boarding school, who had never attended a public school. She only attended charter. But she was not prepared for boarding school. She didn't have essay writing. They hadn't done any studies of great literature. They hadn't done a lot of things.
I would think that your point is to say that it really doesn't have the significance in relationship with whether it's charter or public. We're still failing to get our youth up to the level that they need to be able to accomplish success as they go into higher education.
Certainly. The regional achievement centers prove that to me.
So it's not a matter of the charters are no good and the public schools are no good.
No.
Our system of educating our children are still not adequate enough for them to be successful when they get to higher education. I think that that's where we need to begin to put a lot of our effort into showing where the disparity actually exists. Now, there have been discussions. In fact, as recent, WBGO held a forum where it had about 5 of the former governors, and they talked about education. And one of the governors spoke in terms of that we've had 30 years of trying to put money in the education for poor kids, and they're still not doing as well as they should.
Well, money's not the solution. It's actually the plans, preparation, and professional development, the collaborations that we make. One of the observations that we made with people who had gone to school years ago in Newark was that we spent a lot more time with vocational kinds of preparation for those children not going on to college. We did have a job market here in the Newark area. I hope one is returning where our children would be included. Prudential is building downtown in Newark. And I hope that our children will be afforded some opportunity to get job training and jobs in such places as the corporations.
But should we be so consumed over waiting for them to come up with some strategies that will be helpful for our kids? Couldn't we sit down and come up with some ways in which we know that education of job requirements and the relationship of obtaining the skills to be able to adequately perform those responsibilities should be created from, our environment within itself?
Oh, certainly. I agree with the weekend school concept.
Mm-hmm.
I certainly agree with the adult education concept, which my mother used to promote back there when we lived in a little low-income housing project, Felix Full, the Little Bricks in Newark, that mothers could go and learn some skills. And by the way, some of those mothers did go back to school. There was a collaboration with places like Essex County College and Kane University, and those mothers, some became classroom aides, others became teachers with certification and licenses. I think, but that only works when you have a collaboration with the community. When the community is shut out, you don't have that type of collaboration.
Well, we are our worst enemy. In some cases, we fought for policies that, created this avenue of certification that a number of individuals were not able to accomplish. And now we have a discompensation of individuals that are passionate about doing certain work, especially in the education system, but no longer can be able to have that opportunity because of those restrictions.
Well, it is possible. I myself earned my master's degree with a few free credits as a collaborative between North School and the Montclair State University system. They provided some basic work for us, and we gained 18 credits. And then after that, we were able to go on to get our master's degree. So we can get to credential state. That should not be a problem. They even provided opportunities so that Newark teachers could sit in the classrooms in Newark and do some work. And there were, I don't know the number, but there were several scores of people who came through Project Thistle who were able to get higher degrees. This can be done with credentialed programs also. It just has to be made available.
Wait a minute. Now, when you say that, the availability doesn't exist?
Not at this time that I know about. And I will give credit to those superintendents who did have the foresight to say maybe if we can get a collaborative and we can have these things, there's nothing wrong with it, we can do it.
What do we need to do to recreate that village? So
Apply pressure to our legislators.
Really?
Well, they said that yesterday. They would entertain people coming and talking about what they wanted. They don't hear from groups and organizations, individuals on what their wants and desires are. When we met with Senator Ruiz, we asked her, where's the public hearing? I really think that brings out some of the expressed demands, some of the concerns that people have. And then you open it up, so you say, okay, we have technology today. Send me an email blast. Put it on my page, on my social network. And these things should be able to happen if you have a will to do that.
Right.
But if you have only the desire and focus on privatization, you don't do those things.
I see.
And which is not a new kind of thing. I remember being in the room in the early 80s, perhaps 1981, maybe at Rutgers University or NJIT, when Governor Kane, who was in office at that time, announced this is for the 50 states of the United States. And it was more or less the plan that you see that says we will privatize. Everyone won't go to high school. Everyone won't be entitled to the same education.
You know, it's interesting because when we opened up the conversation, the question was, how is the commissioner really signaling that they are not interested in trying to do anything to make public education a real value to our communities? And this is really clearly the point that we're making, that there has not been any inclusion. And I remember, you know, Governor Keene always stood firm on his ground towards saying that it's evident that in order for success to exist, especially in the communities that had, you know, the type of disparities that ours do, inclusion was absolutely necessary. And a number of initiatives were created. Why do you think that this administration, who boasts so much to say that that process in that time was what built his effort to do what he is doing, is not really embraced?
Well, I guess for me, when I took my master's program, I did it in alternative education, and I studied various models, and one of them was certainly where Commissioner Cerf and Superintendent Anderson and others stem from. They were in a program, Edison Project, which says that business knows how to do business, so business can, you know, conduct education. But we know that business collapsed in that time. And of course, what happens now is we see that perhaps business didn't know how to do business and certainly can't do education. So I think that they're operating from a business model. And I guess with business models, you don't include everybody. And if that morphs its way into education, then you don't have public education. You don't have a public forum. You will find that in many places, the parents don't have a voice, that the PTAs and PTA groups, organizations of parents, really don't have a say in what goes on. I'm not sure what parents collaborated in the No Child Left Behind regulations, but I know that now we have the Parks test coming, which requires children to be online when our schools sometimes are not retrofitted across the state to allow for the technology that we're asking children to test on. They also haven't piloted the program. So when you ask young children sitting first grade and so forth to do standardized testing, I'm wondering what you really mean for those children in their most formative years. And more so, the pressure applied to the teacher that, oh, they're going to be held accountable for the children's scores when they haven't even seen the materials or had the opportunity for professional development.
A lot of the advocacy that you have been doing has been predominantly in the larger city area. You know, Irvington has been one of those areas that is not under state rule and does conduct itself meaningfully within the elected body when it comes down to its order of business. How do you compare the two in terms of saying that there's still a disparity in regard as a whole?
Well, I don't know that each district is probably unto itself, except that you have state standards now, and now coming federal standards. And I would think that what I see of the state districts under takeover is that there's too much political pressure applies. There used to be the ability of the school area people as stakeholders to select their own superintendent of schools. Now you find in Newark, and Patterson, and Jersey City, you have plenty of turmoil that says the community didn't accept this superintendent, or we like the superintendent, as in Patterson. We want to keep that man, but the state is saying, no, we're taking that person away. So I don't see that without the community choice and a community input and a community support and the stakeholders being valued, that you actually have a system where everybody is working ahead, moving, pushing forward. Also, that in districts like Irvington, you have your budget. Your budget decides how you're going to spend the funds in your district. In the takeover districts, you don't have that ability. You're more or less dictated to. And so it's pretty bad that in schools under takeover, as opposed to the others, you don't have a regional achievement center that's promoting academic achievement, accountability for teachers and for students. Rather, you have a Newark School District that has been opted out of the Regional Achievement Center, which is where you're supposed to go when you get the waiver out of No Child Left Behind now, and that is federal. I don't know how it operates, that the commissioner just has the authority to do so many things and not the district. You also have elected officials in both the takeover districts and in districts like Irvington. So the elected officials represent their constituents. How do they operate when you're in a district under takeover, and then they give the authority to the superintendent of veto power? Mm-hmm. That's really maybe allowing an oligarchy to happen.
I got you, right. We're looking, at some of the areas that are important for the NAACP. How do we get engaged as a community, as people who are interested in advocating for those concerns?
The NAACP has a statewide education committee, and each of the branches across the country are asked to have an education committee to discuss those concerns of the people in the district. One of the things that we are asked to do is attend the board meetings and to, make a collaboration between the organization and the schools. And so I recently expressed concern about the track. The track was in ill repair in Irvington. Now we're getting a new track. I love the idea because the children who have talents in track and field, they'll be able to run on a new track. They'll be able to be safe. They won't have to run along the streets. Also, I expressed the desire to find out the status of Amistad, because Amistad is to infuse the history of African American and other people into the teaching of history K to 12. Previously, we used to celebrate Black History Month, and we used to expect that essays and other things were happening during February every year. But at least 10 years ago, I believe 12 years ago, Assemblyman Stanley, who's from this district, and Payne, pushed through the Amistad requirement, and all of the districts, more than 600 in the state, are asked K to 12 to infuse the teaching of lessons, and these lessons come right out of the Amistad Commission on CD, so they're useful. The teachers don't have to research the topic, and then use these lesson plans to talk about our history within the same timelines as the other history.
Wow. Well, then I guess we still have a lot of work to do in terms of really putting together the message of how important education is and the relationship of how Black education is so important, or shall I say cultural, because, you know, in terms of the standard now, we find that there are a number of people from a number of different heritages
Exactly.
that have an African American culture, and that's such an important thing in terms of diversity in our communities. Healthcare. What is the particular situation in regard to that?
There are several items in healthcare. Mainly this year's National Convention came up with a resolution that asks us to look at ways to promote healthier lifestyles, to work at curbing obesity by exercise, by better nutrition, by education. And whenever the National Convention convenes, it spotlights and highlights those issues. Also, there's a look at what happens with people who have been serving long sentences for crack cocaine convictions, as opposed to their counterparts who live in suburban towns who get lesser sentences. And of course, the NAACP is also sponsoring resolutions from the national level to stop the school to prison pipeline, and to stop building the prison industry, with the idea that our children hardly have a chance before they are arrested, and then they are never given a second chance. So all of those kinds of things are given to the local branches to see what can happen. About 2.5 years ago, down at Rutgers Law Center, they talked about second chance opportunities. The New Jersey Institute of Social Justice had been having classes via Mr. Bruton, now Mr. Brooks, and formerly Dr. Doggett, to offer chances for pre-apprenticeships, apprenticeships, and of course I know people who even got their journeyman's license in occupations such as roofing, the women in window glazing, and other forms of construction, which certainly can change you around, because if you had formerly only been occupied with a job on the street and now you can get a $60 an hour job, you might redecide your future and provide for your family with legal and productive opportunities for work.
No, that's really something very important and effective. We're also looking at working together in regard to bringing up a forum in relationship to the housing situation.
Oh, yes.
Why don't you just share with us a little bit about that?
Back in 2007, I recognized that the property tax rates were going up and increasing by the quarter. And I called a meeting so that here in the town hall we could try to discuss what is the future of our homeowners if we're getting 7% increases. My focus was also on the fact that there was a 4% ceiling, and I questioned whether that 4% ceiling on property taxes was being applied here in Irvington, because I saw where my tax bill went up more than 7% in one quarter. And I worked along with the New Jersey Citizen Action Agency so that they were able to give us classes on predatory lending and so forth, which has led us up to the fact that at this time, this is our third year promoting tax appeals through the county courts. Over 900 people won their property tax appeals in 2011 and 12, and many are applying for tax relief that way in 2013. But realizing that we have had a market that collapsed, we have had banks that have scammed people, our intent for July 10th at the town hall at 6:30 p.m. is to have people to come out and talk about their experiences, underwater mortgages, a demand for principal write-down, and a demand that our governor release the funds, over $700 million, that was received when the National NAACP and other organizations sued and won, that the big banks are liable for the kind of mortgages that they put out, which now can't be paid off by people. Our thoughts are that if you can't own the home, you could rent the place. Don't put people out. So our demand is that the county sheriff stop foreclosure evictions. And so on July 10th, we hope to have some agencies come out to talk about the issue of home foreclosure, and more so that we have people who have been under the terrible, terrible crises of losing their properties, losing their homes here in Irvington and elsewhere.
Okay. Well, what's so important about what's happening is that we are really on the forefront of creating an awareness in our communities. Not only that, the NAACP is a membership organization, and as a life member, I like to advocate, become a member for life, and that's so important for us to make sure that people understand that the value in being a part of this organization gives the potential of being able to make things happen because of numbers.
Yes.
So we want to look forward to having an opportunity to continue to have this kind of a forum with you, and we are definitely committed to doing what we can to ensure that individuals know exactly what this organization has been doing, will be doing, and will continue to do.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I think that we are the oldest civil rights organization in the country. We invite the membership. We meet the first Thursdays every month at 60 Payne Avenue in Irvington at the Greater New Point Church at 7:30 p.m. But this coming first Thursday is July 4th, so we will defer and go to the town hall at 6:30 p.m. on July 10th for the public foreclosure hearing. We invite everyone's participation.
All right, and with that, we'd like to thank you for tuning in, and we've been looking forward to bringing you more forums in this particular effort to show that we are doing everything to rebuild the village, and we're going to do it together. Together, we can all make the difference.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely.